Why would God try to kill Moses immediately after telling him to go to Egypt? Also, why would the circumcision of Moses' son allow God to show Moses mercy? Furthermore, what's to be learned for us in this passage of scripture? We're going to answer all of those questions in today's video. Make sure you stick till the end. You're going to love it. My name is Michael. Together, we're uncovering the deep mysteries of the Bible. And one of the biggest ones is actually in Exodus chapter 4. It's right here in verse 24. At the lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah, Moses' wife, took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, touched Moses' feet with it. Surely you are the bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So the Lord let him alone. At that time, she said, bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. If you read this passage and were completely confused and perplexed, then you probably read it correctly. It's a wild passage of scripture that immediately doesn't make a lot of sense unless you understand the past. Let's talk about the immediate past. Moses has been in Midian for about 40 years at this point. You remember he fled Egypt because he had murdered an Egyptian. People were trying to get him, and so he left. While he found Midian, he actually met his wife Zipporah, and apparently they had a son. And about 40 years into Moses' time at Midian, a huge thing happened. God shows up to Moses at a burning bush, and he tells him, you gotta go back to Egypt. Moses agrees, and he starts to go on his way with his wife and his family. And then it seems like immediately as they're on their way, Exodus chapter 4, verse 24 happens. It's like God all of a sudden is mad at Moses, and then Zipporah almost instinctively knows that she has to circumcise her son, and then she touches the skin to Moses' feet, and then suddenly all of that allows God to show Moses mercy. And it's not random, and it's definitely not coincidence. But in order to understand the depth and the gravity of it, we actually have to backtrack even further to Genesis 17. And in Genesis 17, if you remember, shortly there before, God changed Abram's name to Abraham. And he promised him a son, and he promised him descendants. But he gave Abraham clear instruction in regards to the covenant. Let's read it, verse 9 in chapter 17. Then God said to Abraham, your responsibility is to obey the terms of the covenant. You and all your descendants have this continual responsibility. This is the covenant that you and your descendants must keep. God is being extremely clear with Abraham and all of Abraham's descendants. God says, each male among you must be circumcised. You must cut off the flesh of your foreskin as a sign of the covenant between me and you. The sign of the covenant is so clear. And for whatever reason, Moses isn't following it. And we know that because his son isn't circumcised. Now, we don't know why. Perhaps the reason was it wouldn't have been cultural in Midian to circumcise your son. Or maybe Moses just had contempt. Maybe he didn't think that it was important or didn't think that it was necessary. But for whatever reason, in the middle of God, his anger about to murder Moses, Zipporah, she knows, Moses, we haven't been obedient to the covenant God gave Abraham, and we have to act immediately. And it's upon Zipporah's actions that God actually changes murder to mercy. Now, this is so important for Moses, and it's so important for us as believers. It teaches us a few important things. First and foremost, it teaches us that God really, really cares about obedience. When God and Moses made a covenant, actually, when God and Abraham made a covenant, it really mattered, and it matters for generations to come. And when you make a covenant to God, it really, really matters. You see, some people would say, wow, this is kind of out of character for God, because isn't Moses being extremely full of faith by going back to Egypt, the place where he ran from? And I would say partial obedience is still disobedience. Even though Moses is being obedient to God and he's going back to Egypt, he hasn't been obedient to God in fulfilling the covenant that was given to Abraham in Genesis chapter 17. I believe that there's one more reason why this is so important to God. It's because this is a distinction between the Hebrews and the Egyptians. And right now, there's no difference between how Moses is acting and the culture of Egypt has behaved. In order to act according to the culture that God had set in place for the Hebrews, he has to be circumcised, and all of the males after him have to be circumcised. Here's what we can take away from that. You and I should be different. As God has shown his love to us, has given his son to us, we should be different than the rest of the world. Hey, if you liked this video, there's going to be more tomorrow. Also, check out the video from yesterday. We just started Exodus. You're going to really love it, and we'll see you very soon.